Kawasan perindustrian Pasir Gudang di Johor termasuk Sungai Kim Kim didapati tercemar dan berada pada tahap yang membimbangkan. Kerajaan sudah mulakan inisiatif untuk menggantikan kenderaan operasinya kepada kenderaan elektrik EV dalam skala kecil terlebih dahulu.
Assalamualaikum. Waalaikumsalam. Bye. Tolong ya.
Aku pun nak balik. Tapi kalau tak tolong, kena kutuk pula nanti.
Hei. Kenapa ni sayang? Selamat. Semua Tira buat rasa tak betul, Mak. Tira dah tak rasa confident dengan suara Tira.
Tira dulu penuh dengan keyakinan. Apa yang Tira nak, Tira akan cuba juga dapatkan. Kembalikan keyakinan. Sayang?
Betul apa Mak cakap. Aku harus bebas jadi diri sendiri. Harus yakin agar merdeka dari fikiran negatif. Kebebasan haruslah bermula daripada diri sendiri.
National development depends on economic activities within its borders. As the world looks forward to a new era of jobs and workforce centered around full automation, McKinsey maintains its forecast that by 2030, only 50% of manual jobs will be automated. This meant that the human labor workforce, especially the high-skilled and medium-skilled talents, will still be in demand. And the next question is whether a nation has enough pool of talent to supply industry needs. Reflecting this scenario within the domestic landscape in Singapore, balancing workforce demands with its declining and aging population have proven to be the real challenge. Based on a report published in early 2024, Singapore recorded fertility rate at 0.97 by each female, making it among the 10 countries with lowest birth rates in the world. The grim news met with even more concerning trends, which led to declining population in the country as the Republic projected 1 in 4 of its population reach the age of 65 and above.
The longevity of our society is about 85 years old. Half of us are going to live up to 84, 85. So, but then the problem is the health adjusted life expectancy, HALE they call it, is about 74. That means although you live up to 84, for 10 years of your life you go in and out of hospital. So we have two problems to solve. Number one is you're going to live longer. If you live longer and you retire at 55, you have another 30 years to live without income. That's one. But more importantly, you're going to live without purpose. I mean, it's nice to think of retirement. First day, do nothing. Second day, do nothing. After the 1 month, you start quarreling with your wife. Yeah, because, your wife says, what you're doing here, you start to, get into each other's way, right? So, purpose in life is important. And purpose drives you want to do something in your life, right? And therefore work is part of it.
So in this case with the aging population, that's the reason why we increased GST. So we increased GST by 2 percentage points because we wanted to be ready for when our population reaches 2030 and 1 in 4 or 25% of our population is going to be age 65 and above. So you can see we've raise the GST rate earlier, ahead of 2013. That will give us some time to build up the revenue for that and then be able to deal with that.
In the face of this challenge, Forward SG report put forward to address the underlying issues and ensure sustainable economic growth, thus guaranteeing Singaporean ease to live in the future as they move on to next chapter of their life as senior citizen. We spoke to Singapore's Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Digital Development and Information and Ministry of Health, Dr. Janil Puthucheary. He said among the major steps taken by the government in preparation for an aging society is to digitalize healthcare to ensure that everyone has access to health services at their convenience. Apart from that, Dr. Puthucheary said the government has now also invested in making healthcare services available within community reach rather than too centralized at main hospitals.
So we have a strategy. We launched Age Well SG, which we've put out there. But the focus is in our healthcare system as a whole. There are some principles that we're trying to apply, which apply to the entire population, especially the aged, but in preparation for aging. The first is a shift towards community-based care, where we want to go upstream into the population, intervene where people are in the community rather than an institutional response. So we have to continue with, keeping the EDs and the operating theatres and the hospitals running and make sure that they are doing well and best in class. But the additional investments, the resources, the development that we want to see in place are very much about community-based practice. And then the second is to intervene in the population, not wait until people are unwell. Do things for them while they are well. And that includes preventive medicine, so screening and so forth, but also things to do around diet, nutrition, exercise, sleep, social networks.
Furthermore, on the 4th of March 2024, at the Ministry of Manpower Committee of Supply 2024, it was announced that the retirement age in Singapore will be raised to 64, while the re-employment age in Singapore will be raised to 69 in 2026. Currently, the retirement age is 63, while the re-employment age is 68. According to economy expert Associate Professor Walter Teixeira, this policy is not imposed to force seniors to keep working, but rather to prevent employers from dismissing able working seniors.
So Singapore, like many other countries, we are facing much longer lifespans today. Singaporeans today can expect to live much longer, and they can also expect to be in much better health, so they can enjoy, those years, those older years much better than in the past. But because of this, the problem has become that Singaporeans will now have to make a certain amount of money at retirement stretch much further, right? And so to manage this, to manage the fact that people are living longer, they are in better health, but at the same time, they need to make their money stretch longer in retirement. That is actually why we have been gradually raising the retirement age. Because to be clear, what the retirement age means is that the employer cannot dismiss you because of age before that point, right? It doesn't mean that you are forced to keep working. Of course, if you have a lot of money, your children supporting you, whatever, you can retire anytime you want. But it means that when we raise the retirement age, we give the protection to older workers that they cannot be dismissed just because they're old, right? Until they reach the retirement age. But we are doing this gradually, right? We have to do it gradually because, of course, if we do it all in one shot, the employers are going to be very unhappy. They didn't expect to have so many workers they need to keep on. And even the workers, there are misconceptions out there. So for example, when you raise the retirement age, sometimes workers say, oh, why do you want to force me to keep working? But actually it's not true. You can stop working if you want. It's just that we are giving you the protection so that if you want to keep working, your employer cannot dismiss you too early, right? So when workers choose to work longer, they will have more money, they can set aside for retirement, and then they can enjoy their retirement a bit better. And that's, I think, the objective here. Now, then of course the concern is, oh, are we then tying up the labour market with too many older people, right? But actually in Singapore today, we have a happy problem. The happy problem is that our labour market is so tight, right? We have, our unemployment level is so low that actually employers are also seeing older workers as a very valuable source of talent, actually. It's true today many of the older workers, you can see them, they are maybe more employed in the more manual and service jobs where there is actually a shortage of Singaporeans. But we expect in the future that they will also be employed in much higher skilled jobs, just because, you know, the middle-aged workers of the day are higher skilled, and also because we are also trying to work with the employers to think about how to redesign jobs, how to accommodate some of the issues of aging, so that the older workers can be more productive even in all kinds of jobs in the future, not just the jobs that traditionally you see older people in today.
The Forward SG report emphasized a unified understanding among Singaporeans who express trust that rapid technological advancement will render certain jobs obsolete. However, that scenario meant that newer jobs, which require new skills, will be created. Associate Professor Tessera opined that in the future, there will be more seniors who decide to remain in the labour market, especially in the high-skilled sector.
So your observation after some time in Singapore is that you saw that today a lot of, you might say, lower skilled jobs seem to be taken by older Singaporeans. And that is actually because there is quite a big skills difference between older Singaporeans today and younger Singaporeans. You know, our older Singaporeans, they grew up in a time where, you know, in Singapore and Malaysia, actually access to education was very, very limited, right? Many people would go for their primary education, but actually not everybody could make it to secondary, and very, very few in the past made it to university or higher skill education. So because of that, today when you look at our older workforce, they actually may not have the skills necessary to take up, for example, you know, office jobs or technology jobs and so on. That is why when you look around, you will see that quite a lot of them, if they are still working, they will be working in the lower skill or the more manual kinds of jobs. But we expect that in the future, this will not be the case anymore, because today you look at the middle-aged workforce, they are generally very highly skilled in Singapore, and when they get older, if they are still in the workforce, they will probably expect to continue working in higher skilled jobs. But this is a transition that is taking place, and it is actually a difficult transition because I think for the employer end, for example, the employers today, some of them may also have the idea in their head that older workers can only do lower skilled jobs. And this is an idea that will have to change in the next couple of years, because they will soon find that the older workers of tomorrow don't want to do the so-called more manual jobs, because they actually have much, much higher level of skills.
Even so, the domestic labour market is still in need of more talent, especially in the area where local talent is not equipped with the necessary skill quality desired by the industry. In this regard, Minister for Social and Family Development and Second Minister for Health, and also the Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, Masagos Zulkifli Masagos Muhammad, said that Singapore is open to embrace foreign talents for the domestic job market.
So one way to address decline population, not the only way, is to also allow some inputs, some intakes from other countries. But then in Singapore, we also want to make sure that the core of our population are still Singaporeans. It must be so, because then you understand, then you know it's natural for people who are of Singapore descent to then learn to love and to live for the country, right? But migrants also can do that, usually in the second generation. By the second generation, they will start to assimilate. They start to forget where they come from. They don't want to go back to their families because this is a better place and where their friends are. So we have both the incentives, structures to support families and procreation, but we also have on another part of our population management also to allow talents to come in, to allow them to be assimilated and then over time become citizens too.
Well, we are always, as an economy as a whole, going to require non-Singaporean people to be here to work. I mean, 1/3 of our workforce is non-Singaporean. How much of that is tech talent? Well, it varies. Every industry requires tech talent, and the technology industry itself also requires talent. So you will find that structurally we continue to rely on foreign manpower, and likely will do for some time. That has been the case for us, not just for Infocom, technology and communication, every industry.
Kenapa semua rambut dalam iklan bersinar? Sebab pakai penapis foto. Untuk rambut terhidrat bersinar, cuba Dove Baharu. Diberkaya dengan kompleks hair keratin. Menghidrat secara mendalam untuk 72 jam, rambut bersinar tanpa penapis foto. Baharu, Dove Hair Keratin Shine.
Di era digital, pemasaran bukan hanya tentang penjualan semata-mata. Penceritaan menarik jadi kekuatan dalam membina hubungan perniagaan, tingkat pengetahuan, perkasakan perniagaan anda. Saksikan segmen Jiwa SME dalam program Awani Pagi dan Niaga Awani setiap Isnin hingga Khamis di saluran 501. Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah Jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Daulat Tuanku.
Ketajaman fikiran pembangkit strategi. Di saat segala perlawanan semakin genting, mara sepenuhnya. Berjuang bermatian. Waktukan tirai jaringan. Oh, cantik. Terus melangkah megah mencipta kemenangan. Sokonglah sepenuhnya demi Liga kita. Liga Super secara langsung di Astro Arena Bola dan Astro Go.
5 lelaki penghantar makanan didakwa di Mahkamah Magistrate Bangi atas tuduhan membunuh seorang pemandu kereta lelaki dalam satu kejadian.
4 sungai di sekitar kawasan perindustrian Pasir Gudang di Johor termasuk Sungai Kim Kim didapati tercemar dan berada pada tahap yang membimbangkan. Kerajaan sudah mulakan inisiatif untuk menggantikan kenderaan operasinya kepada kenderaan elektrik EV dalam skala kecil terlebih dahulu.
Even though it appeared that Singapore is open to foreign talent, the door is not as wide open as expected. This is based on Singapore's decision to enforce foreign worker quota for companies operating in Singapore based on dependency ratio ceiling DRC, which is different for each industries. For this purpose, a maximum of 83.3% of foreign workers are allowed to be hired in construction sector, process sector 83.3%, marine shipyard 77.8%, manufacturing 60%, and services sector 35%.
For the employment pass, we have now introduced Compass, which is a points-based system. So you look at individual capabilities, factors as well as company factors. So it factors both ways. So you can import talents. We are open economy, so I say we open free market. But I will look at A, your salaries, 2, your qualifications, 3, your company's diversity. If the whole company is like one type of nationality, tak jalan, you will lose points. If the whole company has certain skill sets requirements, of course you get certain bonus points. So we look at company requirements, we look at diversity, we look at local individual. So just four key points. You know how many points you score, you know the guy in or out, pass or fail. Very simple. Point-based system. So in the old days when we apply for EP, companies will tell us, hey, you know, we don't know why you approve or didn't approve. So it was quite not so transparent. So last year we introduced Compass, and I think it's been quite good for companies because now they can plan ahead. They know exactly how to score the points, or you do lose points if you have too many of one nationality in one firm, for example. So you create diversity within your firms. So as an international hub, you have to then manage diversity and things like that. So we do. So that's one part. Then on top of that, we now have various passes like One Pass. That one gives top tier professionals at C-suite levels. Some of them are startup head CEOs or founders and so forth. So at that level, professionals at a certain tier, at a certain skill set. We give them longer term stay in Singapore, more access, dependence pass, your family can come and so forth. So there's certain privileges that are given to certain tiers. And of course, there are specific other tiers like Tech Pass to bring tech talents into Singapore, for example.
And the cost to hire foreign talent does not come cheap.
For employers in Singapore, I think there are probably two big problems that they tend to worry about. One is, can they get enough manpower? Because Singapore is a very manpower constrained country. Local population is not that big. The fertility rate, is very low and so on. So yeah, first problem they have is manpower. The second problem they have is cost. Because unfortunately, we are quite a high-cost country now. So every time they hire, they worry, how much am I paying? Is it going to be worth it? And so on, right? So this is where our foreign manpower strategy comes in to try to accommodate what employers need, right? So if you are thinking about the kinds of industry which is very manpower intensive. So if you look around the street, you can see things like, our food and beverage, could be our manufacturing, could be our services. A lot of these industries require a lot of people, right? To staff your shops, to staff your restaurants, whatever. So in these industries, we do allow the employers to tap on getting lower skill service workers, for example, from the region, right? So there can be a lot of Malaysians, for example, here working in Singapore in F&B and so on. And we generally allow the employers to do this as long as they hire enough Singaporeans. So for lower to medium skill work, we have a quota system, and the way it works is that the more Singaporeans you hire, then the more foreigners you are allowed to hire, but you must maintain a certain minimum ratio of Singaporeans there. We also require that the employers pay the Singaporeans a certain minimum amount. This is how we ensure that basically the jobs that are created for Singaporeans through this are not worthless jobs, for example. So as long as they hire Singaporeans, pay them a minimum amount, then they're entitled to go and hire more foreigners, which will help them manage their manpower demand, also manage their cost a bit. So that's for the lower to medium skill jobs. So for the higher skill jobs, the calculation is a bit different, right? So I think if you look at your multinational corporations, your tech companies like Google or whatever, their first question is, okay, they're saying basically, I can afford to pay the workers, quite a lot of money. It's not a problem, right? The cost structure is not an issue. But then they will say, I just cannot find the high-skilled workers. Your Singaporeans, yes, there may be a lot of high-skilled Singaporeans here, but everybody wants the same workers, right? So I cannot expand my business without being able to hire more people, and some of the best talent is actually global, right? So if they are, for example, if you are, let's say, opening an AI lab in Singapore or something, yeah, we do have Singaporean AI scientists, computer scientists, engineers, and so on, but there are not enough of them. So that's when they say, for this post, I want the talent search to be global. So can I do that? And for high-skilled talent, we actually tell the companies, yes, you can do that. And in fact, we have no quota on that. But we need to have proof that this talent is truly a global talent.
Associate Professor Teixeira also explained it is an established practice for companies based in Singapore to readily let go foreign talent during times of crisis. According to him, from Singapore perspective, foreign talents are regarded as buffer to meet industry talent need.
So some people might say, if you have so many foreign workers in Singapore, doesn't that increase unemployment because you got all these people that employers can hire? But actually it's the opposite. What happens is, in Singapore, we encourage actually the employers to think about using foreign employment as a so-called buffer. So what does it mean by a buffer? It means that when the economy is doing well, when you have a lot of demand for your services, then when you cannot meet all of the labor demand with the locals, you can hire the foreigners. But at the same time, we actually do expect the employers, if they run into difficulties, we expect them to actually consider letting go the foreign workers first in order to preserve local employment. So that's basically our concept in Singapore. And so far, this has worked quite well in the sense that when we run into a major economic slowdown, yes, then actually the employers do tend to let many of the foreign workers go first. And this is also actually required by our policy of the quota system, because if you actually terminate the Singapore workers, then you will lose your eligibility to hire the foreigners anyway.
Associate Professor Teixeira further shared Singaporean sentiment when it comes to opening up market to foreign talent.
So, of course, anytime you have migration of high-skilled workers, or anytime you have migration of any kind of worker, if that worker is competing with you for a job, of course you will feel not very happy about it, right? And I think Singaporeans are not different from anybody else anywhere in the world. When they see foreigners coming here and they're working in the same kinds of jobs as them, then they may be a bit worried. They may be asking questions like, is this right, is this fair, and so on. So in order to moderate or manage this, we have a lot of policies that are designed to try to ensure that the employers basically look at Singaporeans first for any jobs, right? And the way we do that is we try to restrict the migration of foreigners, especially for the high-skilled jobs, only to areas where there is actually a shortage of Singaporeans, or areas where it is much more likely that they have the skills that the Singaporeans may not have in the same quantity or quality perhaps sometimes.
Looking beyond talent development within a single nation border, a shift to development for shared prosperity is the way forward to keep not just Singapore economy attractive, but also the entire region.
Right? Because I think the reality today is that when you look at foreign investors, foreign investors, I think, are not thinking anymore, oh, I invest in Singapore and that's it, right? Or I invest in Malaysia and that's it. No, they're actually thinking, I'm going to invest in the region, right? And so when they are making their decision to invest in Singapore, actually, access to high-quality Malaysian workers, access to the Malaysian market, economy, and so on, is actually a factor. We cannot pretend it's not a factor. And likewise, we would also think if somebody is investing in parts of Malaysia, they also have to think, okay, do I have access to the services in Singapore? Do I have access to the labour market in Singapore if I need some kinds of workers I cannot find so easily in Malaysia? So all these factors are relevant, and that is why I think we don't want to think about it as, oh, is Malaysia doing better or is Singapore doing better? Actually, I think to compete for these global investments and the market and so on, we do need to work together. And that is why I think one of the most exciting developments, I think, recently will be this talk about a special economic zone between Singapore and Southern Malaysia, a project which I believe both Singapore and Malaysian government has prioritized. And you can see why I think we need to prioritize it, because it is about making the combination much more powerful in the global market than either of us could be alone.
After all is said and done, the globalized world and closely intertwined nations in a region like ASEAN require more than working in silos to strive for success.
I think at the end of the day, a prosperous Malaysia is a prosperous Singapore. Yes, indeed. A problematic Malaysia will be a problem for Singapore, your neighbours. I don't know, you want to live in a ghetto, you don't want, right? You want to live in a good neighbourhood. And we want our Malaysian friends, our Indonesian friends, our ASEAN friends, all to be good and better, even better than us, because we will benefit. We want a peaceful region. We want a place where we can help each other.
In conjunction of National Day in Malaysia and Singapore this August, may both countries continue to work together as partners to face future challenges. Happy National Day Singapore. Selamat Hari Kebangsaan dan Dirgahayulah Malaysia.